Hello there, welcome to the Talking City podcast brought to you by the Manchester Evening News. My name is Joe Bray, joined by Simon Bajkowski, and today we are talking the title. And Manchester City haven't won it yet, but they took a massive step towards it when they finally won a Premier League game at Tottenham. I mean, by this point, Si, we're recording this on Friday. Everyone knows how the game went, but let's talk about sort of the atmosphere and the nerves and the fact that Spurs fans were weirdly wanting their team to lose, and it was a very strange game, wasn't it? And everyone will tell you it's inevitable. We've read that a few times, but it was far from guaranteed, those 3 points, wasn't it?
I thought it was boring.
The whole thing is
a formality. No one watching that thought Tottenham were in it at any point, and City cruised to 3 points. Very easy.
And that's it for today's Talking City podcast. Thanks for
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was a fantastic night of Premier League football to sort of, conclude what has been a fantastic Premier League season. I know we've got one game to go, but like for the final week to still have such jeopardy was amazing. And there were about 3,000 City fans in the away end, and all of them were very, very nervous when the game began. And then City kind of weren't themselves. It felt like we said to each other, we were sort of playing it like it was a Champions League night, like it was against Madrid or something. I think did Pep say it was like they played it like Istanbul when again they were not very good. And at half time it's 0-0. Tottenham playing really good, some good stuff, and Ederson had made a really good save from Bentancur in the first half. And yeah, I mean, I saw a few sort of City employees at half time, and they were not that confident. The consensus being kind of, yeah, City need to play better. And yeah, we saw a huddle at the start of the second half, which we've never seen before.
Do you think that was a Pep instruction? Because watching the documentary, we learned that the pre-match huddle was something that Pep told them to do, and it had a really sort of transformative effect last season. It feels like it could have been another Pep instruction this time.
I'm not ruling it out. I'm sort of in the middle of finishing off the end of season read for the Premier League, and without giving anything away, it's kind of like the players are really motivated and find new ways to motivate each other. But Pep is like the Mr. Motivator who motivates them all. That one extra bit, and it feels like Pep said what he said at half time, which was to sort of go out and show their best, and it didn't matter what the result was. They just needed to show what they hadn't shown in the first half, really, but that character of the City team. And then the players then kind of said, right, okay, let's do this, and let's have one final word before the second half starts. So I think it was the players, but certainly driven by Pep still. They scored like the most City of goals, didn't they? That Erling Haaland tap-in when sort of Foden did amazing to sort of win a duel with Romero and then carry the ball and then cross it. It missed De Bruyne and Haaland, but Bernardo got it, slipped it into De Bruyne at the byline, cross it, cut back, Erling Haaland taps it in, 1-0. And
I'm glad you've explained that, because as you know, I missed that. I saw the cross go behind Bernardo and Foden and put my head back in my laptop, and next thing I know, there's 3,000 City fans going very, very excited in the corner.
Yeah, and then we sort of gave City a bit more control, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, as it always happens, if City score a goal, the opposition then has to come out a bit, don't they?
But then they lost it as soon as Ederson. So Spurs came back at him. Ederson made a save from I'm not sure.
It's been a few days since.
Yeah, I mean, it's on his Instagram that whoever the save was from. Yeah, we'll get into that. But yeah, he then has to go off with concussion, even though he absolutely didn't want to go off with not concussion, fractured eye socket, isn't it?
Yeah.
Despite the fact he really didn't want to go off, kicks a drinks box after Romero had kind of kneed him in the face. And Ortega comes on and then makes not one but two brilliant saves, and then City have it in their hands, and then Manu Akanji gets caught in possession, and Son races through on goal, the best finisher in the Premier League, with 5 minutes to go, and Ortega saves. It will go down as one of the defining moments of the season, because
it felt like it happened in slow motion, didn't it? Because
yeah,
I watched it
yeah,
back and I was like, he's not actually had that far to run it. To me, my memory was Akanji lost it on the halfway line and Son had 20 minutes to run in and pick his spot. But I think the entire City team and fans and coaching staff had their head in the hands, and Guardiola was on the floor, wasn't he? It was
yeah.
literally the title flashing before their eyes.
Guardiola fell backwards, and I don't think he'd have got back up if Son had scored. I think he should have been laying on the. It felt as big as the 2019 Spurs game when Sterling's goal was ruled out through VAR and Pep's on his knees in that hoodie / cardigan / whatever that was. It was enormous. It was you talk about no jeopardy or whatever in the title race. This was it, and there's Arsenal fans questioning whether Son wanted to score. It's that big. City, Foden does really well again. Knocks a ball through for Doku, who did really well as a substitute, and Doku is fouled by ex-Manchester City player Pedro Porro. Was there anything in that? Who knows? Of course there wasn't. And Haaland for goal number 27, I think, of the Premier League season. What a rubbish season he's had. To make it 2-0, and the City fans go wild, and the City players go wild. And that felt huge. It was enormous. Like, City came very, very close to not winning that game, but they won it. They lead Arsenal by 2 points going into the final day. It feels like a long wrap of that match, but it had a hell of a lot in it, didn't it?
But I think that serves the purpose of saying it was far from guaranteed, because that was a game where we didn't know what was happening. And, I normally like to write something, have the bones of it done by half time. At half time, I was like, I've got no idea the way this is going to go, so I don't know what I'm going to write. And it was that one. And I think the celebrations when City won the penalty, especially after the Ortega save, I've seen Leicester for goals. That was an away end to sort of remember, I think, for the City fans that were there. And it will have been so nerve-wracking all the way through the day, and then to have that moment and that 10 minutes added time where City were just comfortable, the game was won. And yeah, I think any suggestion that was always going to happen was from someone who didn't watch the game or has not watched City throughout the season. And yeah, I think we'll talk a little bit more about Ortega and his position and that save, but that felt like Ederson saving the Champions League final, or a moment as big as Steven Gerrard's slip that defined the title in another way for City. It was one of those moments, and he came on for 20 minutes and got player of the match, it just shows how important his contribution was. Quick word on the Spurs atmosphere. It was an odd game to be at. There was all the talk of, do they want City to win because it stops Arsenal? At the start, they seemed to back the team a fair bit. They had a few attacks. They were getting behind sort of the shots that were going on goal. And then when City scored, there were a lot of anti-Arsenal chants, and the noise sort of got louder, didn't it? And afterwards, Ange Postecoglou comes out and hammers everything and everyone and says the foundations are fragile, and he's learned a lot about what he needs to do in the previous 48 hours. But have you ever been in an atmosphere like that where everybody wants the away side to win?
I have been in an atmosphere like that in many pre-season games. It had that kind of atmosphere, didn't it? Where you had kind of a lot of people who were sort of happy to be at the football, but weren't necessarily interested in the result, and were going to sort of like, if there was action in the box, they would be excited by it. But if they weren't necessarily roaring their team on, so there was a lot of noise when Spurs had chances to score, but there wasn't necessarily that kind of support for the team It was weird. Supporting a football team is weird. It is irrational. It defies logic a lot of the time. Um, it's kind of the same as like, um, I'm sure, for instance, like there will be, how am I, what's a good example? Like, I'm sure there will be Man City fans who are desperate who were desperate to be at Spurs, or who will be desperate to be at the Etihad on Sunday, who will be offering astronomical sums for a ticket, and like, as much as it costs for a season ticket for one match, and there will be people who will be turning that down, despite the fact they could make their season ticket back in one game because they just want to be there. And there were a lot of Spurs fans who turned up for the final game of the season, but not all of them were bothered about Spurs winning, and a lot of them were very happy that the result didn't help Arsenal. You can understand why Postecoglou's angry, and I think I read something uh, after that about Postecoglou being, because he was very cryptic in his post-match press conference, wasn't he?
Hmm.
Talking about the foundations, but not going into it. And I read some stuff. I don't know if it's right, but stuff about him being annoyed at like things that some of his staff had said to him in the week about like fielding a youth team and things like that. And you can more understand sort of being annoyed at your colleagues than you
Yeah.
can the fans, because it's also kind of completely understandable fracture between manager and fans. Like Pep's had it with City fans so many times where he's kind of like, well, why don't you just do this? Because I want you to do this. And they're like, well, no, we want to do what we want to do. Like booing the Champions League anthem, for instance. So yeah, it sort of, a lot was made of it, but it's kind of, these things happen and are natural. But it was a strange atmosphere to be in, and I think Postecoglou kind of suggested after the match that if there'd been a better atmosphere, and Son might have scored, and we'll never know. But City came away with 3 points, and they're very happy with that.
Yeah, I think that was his argument. He was saying that in the past, when they've got late goals, it was because the fans were roaring them on. But I think as soon as City scored the first, I think Tottenham fans were thinking, okay, well, we gave it a go. We'll continue to probably play well for the most of the second half. But if we lose, then that's football. And there's a couple of fans in front of us, weren't there, who were wearing an old sky blue Tottenham away shirt, who cheered the goal. I genuinely don't know if they were Tottenham fans or they were City fans trying to blend in. Or
I think you have to be Tottenham fans, surely, to wear that really old blue away kit.
it's a lot of
I
effort
don't
for a
know.
City fan to go to.
Yeah, but we should say as well, they were thrown out after that first goal.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
like there were a lot of people in that section angry
Yeah.
that they'd celebrate. So it wasn't like the whole stadium was supporting City for the night. And also, like, yeah, again, like, if you're gonna go to those lengths to pick out that old niche shirt in order to, have a joke and take the mick out of Arsenal, then fair play. Like, football fans get increasingly little to smile about with kind of the way they're treated by clubs and broadcasters and everyone else. So, if you can get a smile out of that, then like, brilliant.
I did think there was a lot of half and half scarves, and was this a game for the home fans where half and half scarves are acceptable, because
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
sort of summed up their conundrum, didn't it?
And also, I sort of wondered how the crowd would be, and then very early on, there was a big rousing rendition of "Stand Up If You Hate Arsenal," and it was like, oh yeah, yeah, the stadium can kind of unite by hating Arsenal,
Mm-hmm.
and there's been a lot of sort of salty comments about, oh, you don't get a trophy for stopping Arsenal from winning the league and whatever, and but the truth is that they will get a lot of pleasure from Arsenal winning the league, and if Spurs had helped Arsenal to win the league, then Arsenal fans would not have let them forget it, because that is what rivalries are about. And, Spurs fans will, should the expected happen on Sunday, Spurs fans can turn around to Arsenal fans and say, well, you've not won the league. You've won nothing in 4 years under Arteta. Why is he so good? And Arsenal fans can counter, but they won't be able to say it. They did win the Community Shield, didn't they? But they weren't technically invited to that. Well, they were invited to that. They didn't qualify for it. So,
and they may get a chance to defend that trophy in August if the same thing happens again and City win the double. We'll leave it there for part one. We'll be back after the break to go a little bit more into the Ederson versus Ortega conundrum that is no longer a decision that City have to make for the final day. Hi there, welcome back to the Talking City podcast. Now, as we discussed, Ederson went off at Tottenham with a nasty-looking injury. Stayed on for a little bit. I think we understand now that he passed all the on-field protocols, but Pep Guardiola was informed that his eye could start swelling. It did. We saw he had a massive black eye at the end of the game, and that is because he's got a small fracture to his eye socket. He's out of the last 2 games. But had he been available, there would have been a serious question of who starts the final day in goal, because the way Ortega came on and the way that Guardiola has sort of set up his squad this season is that if you're playing well, you keep the shirt, and that's benefited Ortega a couple of times. Then he's lost his place again to Ederson. But we'd written a piece before we learned of Ederson's injury of who starts on the final day, and I think the consensus was Ortega.
Yeah, I think so. And Ederson has since posted on Instagram, hasn't he? Saying nobody understands, and there are pictures of 2 saves that he made against Spurs. So, not wanting to read too much into that, but is he sort of saying that he hasn't had the credit he got for his saves in the Spurs game, and maybe he hasn't. But there's no doubt that Ortega came on and made some terrific saves, and I can't remember which teammate it was that pointed it out, but one of them said, he's been doing this since, he did the same at Anfield when City were really, really under the cosh, and he's done it a lot. Ederson's been injured 4 times in his last 15 starts in the league, which is insane in the first place. But also, I think there's probably only one other match he's been substituted in like 7 years, and that was when he got booted in the face by Mane very early on in his career. So,
but it's not like there's a trend of he's injury prone.
No.
It's all sort of contact injuries, isn't it?
It's insanely bad luck, and he remains number 1. But in this world that Guardiola has created, where you earn your spot based on performances, it's really, really hard to turn around to Ortega and say, you've just won us the league, essentially. Like, sit on the bench while we finish it off, please. So I think Ortega, with that incredible save, which Ederson might have made, but the fact is that he didn't make it because he wasn't on the pitch for it. Ortega made it, and so he should get the chance to see it through, and he did. Well, he will do, because Ederson's injured, so it's harsh on Ederson, but injuries are harsh. You look at John Stones; he's had a load of injuries this season. He's been fit recently, but he sat on the bench because Akanji and Ake and Guardiola and Walker are all playing, too well and are too reliable to be bumped out of the team, and Diaz as well when he came in at Fulham. So, like, it's tough, but this is football at the top level, and someone has to miss out. And it's probably easier for Guardiola, given that Ederson's injured, because he doesn't have to make that decision.
I think, on this piece that will no longer see the light of day, I said I think Guardiola would prefer the decision is made for him, because it was sort of an impossible call to make. Whoever he chose, the other one was going to be rightfully really unhappy, and that would have a knock-on effect on potentially both of their futures and that sort of thing. And the better Ortega plays, the more he's making an argument that he should be playing more than just in the domestic cup competitions. And if he goes and produces a masterclass in the final day and in the FA Cup final, then he can turn around to City and say, listen, play me more, or I'm going to go and get the games that I deserve. And it is a very tricky situation that has come about because, as Guardiola says, he's got two exceptional keepers, both performing well when they get the chance. And it is I don't know how he would have done it if Ederson was fit, but I think as harsh as it is on Ederson, it probably is better for the sort of unity of the squad in the final day that there is just a black and white decision that is being made for him.
Yeah. And, I'm sure Ederson will be cheering on Ortega because the goalkeeping team is pretty tight. I know Ederson will be available to collect his medal should City win because he's been a big part of their success as well. And, we can say that he remains number one. But he'll have to prove himself again when pre-season starts, because that is how every season starts with Guardiola. Players are allowed to be upset and angry and everything um, when they don't play. How they respond to that, and providing Edison is there and he's not just like flown out to Brazil because he's fuming, which I don't think anyone expects is going to happen, then it's perfectly acceptable. I think that's kind of a point of the City dressing room as a whole. Like they are, it's a very mature dressing room, and like Edison kicks off when he got taken off. De Bruyne has had a few spats and things, and like, but it's never blown up into anything massive because people react in the moment and then they forget about it and move on. So Edison's had his say, and yeah, I'm sure on Sunday he's going to be fully backing Ortega.
And again, this is Ederson who's, despite sort of popular belief, has made a lot of important saves. Champions League final being the main ones, but City wouldn't be in the position they are without him. So you can understand why he feels he is number one and probably deserves the credit, but also Ortega was the story at full time because he came off and did something incredible that no one expected him to do. So you can sort of see both sides, and that's why I think it's probably best that the decision has been made for City. We also saw Kevin De Bruyne hobble off. He got a bit of a kick, and he said it felt like a knife down his Achilles when he got tackled. But he's since said he should be okay. We'll find out for definite when we go to the press conference in a couple of hours. Guardiola should confirm that De Bruyne's okay because he's been training as well. But it feels like for the final day, it's going to be a similar squad because again, John Stones wasn't on the pitch, and it could have been a lot worse. Basically, I think is what I'm trying to say is that yes, Ederson is out, but you've got a fantastic second choice keeper, and you've also probably got Kevin De Bruyne, who could have been out, which would have been a massive blow. Who is back, and it should be a fully fit squad. Apart from that, I think. Am I right? Am I right? There's no other injuries.
No, not that we know of.
Unless Guardiola drops a bombshell, but I don't think he would on the eve of the game, would he? He would normally keep that close to his chest.
No, and yeah, they won't have had too much time to train anyway after Spurs, so they'll have been taking it pretty light before they build up today and tomorrow.
I think that was the message, wasn't it? It was a lot of nothing's won yet. We've still got a job to do. We're going to do exactly what we've done throughout the season, prepare for the opposition, and that is how City have got. Again, do you know, I keep coming on these podcasts and forgetting how many games are unbeaten, but there are a lot of wins in a row and a lot of games unbeaten, and that's because they take it game by game.
Yeah, and I think not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how they handle next week, because I don't think it's too controversial to say their form dropped off last season when they won the league. They won the league with a few games to go. That they played that Chelsea game where they rested a load of players. Then they kind of experimented against Brighton and Brentford. And like they weren't the same team against United in the cup final. Like they won because they've got better players and a better manager, but like they weren't great, and they weren't great against Inter. having had that kind of break and that pressure valve, because they've been going for months being like, we need to win, or Arsenal will win the league. We need to win. So on Sunday, if they win, that all that pressure is released. But they've still got another final a week later. So it's kind of like, do you keep on? Do you keep going? Or do you kind of let them have a big celebration for winning the league and then come back? And it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with that and whether they can kind of maintain their level against United in the FA Cup final.
I think surely it will help them a bit more, having come off the back of assuming that they beat West Ham. They're coming into it on form. They don't have to sort of reset after, like you say, the Brighton and Brentford results last year, and that was understandable because they had two finals that they were top priority and they needed to rest players after a busy period. But this season, he's got 6 days. He'll probably give them a couple of days off to celebrate the Premier League and go away with the families and then come back. And that seems to have worked over the last month or so, giving them that time off, then coming back and focusing. So I would imagine, if they lose, it'll be a completely different story. I'd imagine that it will probably help them to have that momentum to take in. And United are a different story altogether, but City are firm favourites, and they've only got the final to prepare for as well. Last season they had the Champions League, the treble, the pressure of all that. This season it's just, can we win the final?
Yeah. It's just one of those things. I think mentality has got City to a long to where they are, as well as the quality on the pitch. But I'm sure they will be up for the double, but the double does not mean as much as winning 4 Premier Leagues in a row. So it is kind of I think it will kind of like be an inevitable drop, providing they win the league. It's just how quickly and how much they can get themselves back up for that final.
Guardiola said that last week. He was like, something was ignited in them around February, March, April, that they could make this history, and they were actually in a position where they could do it. He always says, don't think about titles and trophies until you're in a position where you can see it. They are now in a position where it is the next game. If they win it, they are champions. But you're starting to see, Kyle Walker said it, I think Phil Foden said it, and it's a source of motivation, isn't it? I don't know if other teams or in the past other clubs might have said, we're not thinking about the bigger picture, the history. But it seems like that is something that really motivates this side, because Guardiola always searches for that. How do you motivate a side who's won 2 in a row, 3 in a row? It seems like the chance to make football history in England is that sort of motivation this year.
Yeah, and don't forget there are a bunch of players who don't feel like they've had the credit necessarily that they deserve for their achievements. So how do you respond to that? Will you go out and achieve more? I remember Diaz saying earlier in the season, like, please make noise about us because it'll only make winning even better for us. Like that's running through the squad, and they kind of push each other on, saying, well, no one else is going to hype you up, so make it so that they can't help but talk about you winning.
And we saw that sort of togetherness at full time at Tottenham, the celebrations when they won. I've not seen that sort of release of emotion, even after the second Haaland goal, the penalty, when they knew that they were going to win that game. It felt like, not that the mask slipped, but they allowed themselves just for 30 seconds to go, this is a really good feeling. And then they went and saw the game out, and then they had a bit of a celebration. And then, as Guardiola says, they just cracked on after the game and didn't celebrate too much. And they know they've got a job to do. We will be back after a short break to discuss West Ham, the implications. Everyone will know them already, but the permutations and what could happen on Sunday at the Etihad. Welcome back to part 3 of the Talking City podcast. Now, Sunday is absolutely massive. Thousands will be heading to the Etihad campus to see Barry Manilow, and before that they will be coming to see Manchester City potentially become Premier League champions against West Ham. A win does it. Anything that matches Arsenal's result against Everton does it. If City draw, Arsenal would win the league on goal difference if they were to win. So it's as easy as a win seals the title, and anything else opens the door for Arsenal. Guardiola said if Son had scored that goal at Tottenham that Ortega saved, then Arsenal would be champions. That is the only thing that's in their heads, is to win. Guardiola mentioned Aston Villa a lot in his post-match interviews and press conferences. He was saying he expects a similar game. He said West Ham are very direct. He named all the players that will cause City problems. And I mean, West Ham have nothing to play for, but he's not expecting an easy game. He's got to say that. He can't say they're going to canter to the title, but surely they don't do what they did against Aston Villa 2 years ago.
I'm going to put my neck out and say I am expecting an easy game. I feel like Spurs was the Villa moment where they were really nervous and tightened up, and then they found a way to get over the line, and now they will just power through. I mean, Guardiola spoke afterwards as well, didn't he, about his line that he says before about sort of the last serve to win Wimbledon is always the toughest serve, and things like that. But you know, I feel like the players knew how big Tuesday was, and are now in the mode where they can see the finish line. They'll be able to see the trophy in front of them on Sunday. You know, we spoke to Kyle Walker after the game, and he was asked, like, you know, how do you make sure you don't do a Villa? And he was like, do you want the silly answer? Don't go 2-0 down. Don't make the mistakes that take you to be 2-0 down. The good, you know, experience has been mentioned a lot over the course of the season, as it often is, and you know, it comes into play in times like this. No one can say that City won't lose or they won't go 2-0 down, but they have so much experience of kind of anything happening and responding to anything happening. And you think this season probably more than any, I think they've got more points than any other season in recovering from losing positions. That's more away from home than at home, but they've still done it. And yeah, you just feel like they have had their major wobble and their huge scare. And Son going through was up there with being 2-0 down against Aston Villa with 30 minutes to go. And so having overcome that, I think that West Ham will be fairly straightforward on the final day, and sort of feel like it will be more. I think Pellegrini's team won the league on the final day, and that was fairly
Against West Ham, I think.
Yeah. So I'm kind of thinking along those lines at the minute.
Like you said, you're writing your end of season piece. I'm going through every month of the season, telling the story of the season for a supplement which fans will be able to buy. And there are a lot of examples of, especially earlier in the season, of going behind but then winning 3-1, and that sort of result where the start of the game might not be good. They might have conceded a goal against the run of play, but by the end it was another comfortable game, and someone, Phil Foden, Kevin De Bruyne, Erling Haaland, has taken that game by sort of the scruff of the neck and said, no, I'm going to get us out of this. And I think that's been something this season. Last year against Aston Villa, it was often Ilkay Gundogan. Erling Haaland's got all the goals, and there are enough characters in that side, and they've been through these experiences where, I mean, I think we said after the Champions League final, they'd have probably lost or conceded late on in another season, but they've got that experience now. Against Real Madrid, they might have conceded a goal and lost. Against Chelsea this season, it feels like they're getting better at grinding out results when they do get ahead. So I would agree with you that they should win. They should make it a lot easier of a game of it. And I mean, maybe it might be a game like the Brighton away one on the final day of the season, where if they fall behind, then they go and win 4-1. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm sensing there might be a slip, but by the end of the day, I think it'll be comfortable.
The thing is, as well, for all that was made about Spurs wanting Arsenal to lose, like, a lot of West Ham fans will be very happy to see City take the title over Arsenal. You know, West Ham fan base is get on very well, and have done for years. West Ham get on less well with Arsenal. And then there's kind of Declan Rice as well. You factor that in, it's quite interesting. Moyes saying the other week, West Ham were getting heavily beaten away from home regularly because they didn't have Declan Rice. It was as simple as that. And, for all that Declan Rice has lifted up Arsenal, it would be a sort of a Rice smile if the absence of Declan Rice in the West Ham team made it much easier for City to beat Arsenal to the title. But David Moyes is going. He will want to win on his final game, but he's had his big send off at the London Stadium in front of all the fans who've given him, everything he needs. And they will have a good time in hopefully the sunshine. I think it's meant to be nice. On Sunday in the away end, and I don't think they will be too bothered because with nothing else to play for themselves, I don't think they'll be too bothered if City win. Again, you will get the West Ham players obviously playing to win the game, but it's not like there is a major obstacle in the way for City like there could be if it was another team.
Like, for example, the QPR game, they were fighting to stay up. There's nothing to play for West Ham, which should benefit City. And I must have said this a million times on the podcast, but I always feel the only team that can beat City are themselves. And that feels especially true on Sunday. We know Ortega will start ahead of Ederson. Any other changes you would make to that side? You've got the likes of Stones and Grealish and Doku on the bench who are experienced and could play, but it feels like he'll go with the same system that's got him to this point.
Yeah, I think so. I think you'd probably go with that. I mean, there's an argument for Doku to start because he played so well, but then it might not be what he wants best. But if he's so good as a substitute, which he has been, you probably just keep him as a substitute and keep him coming on in that final half hour. The only other change is probably Grealish for Kovacic. But if you're doing that, then you're asking, unless you play him Foden and De Bruyne in the middle together, which he doesn't seem to want to do, you're asking Bernardo Silva to come inside, which he can do because he can do absolutely anything and everything. But it does just require a shift, and you wonder whether same again, lads, is easier than trying to tweak kind of the personnel and the system.
I always feel like if you do have Grealish and you got Rodri on his own, you probably need John Stones to push up and help Rodri, and that would be the Kovacic replacement in terms of the extra body. And yes, Bernardo can play there, and you shift the players around. But no, I do tend to agree that it's same again and rely on those players off the bench. And I mean, you would then think it'd be similar in the FA Cup final, which feels ridiculous to say that Stones and Grealish might not start either of them after what they did last season, but it's just a reflection of how this year has gone as well.
Yeah, and the same was true of Foden last year. And I remember speaking to him after the final league game at Brentford, and he played really well at Brentford, and he played really well at Brighton. And he'd been injured. He'd come back from having his appendix out, come back early from that. But he'd not really been in the team all season. He'd had basically the season that Grealish has had this season. And he'd sort of said, I hope I've done enough to start in the FA Cup and Champions League final, but it's out of my hands. But I feel like I've given everything in the last few weeks to be able to do that. And he didn't start the FA Cup final, and he didn't start the Champions League final. He came on for De Bruyne in the Champions League final, and played an important role, but he wasn't picked to start. And looking back now, 12 months on, Foden FWA Footballer of the Year. So how mad it was that Foden was basically outplayed by Grealish for the whole of last season, but these things happen, and that's kind of what Grealish and Stones have got to take from it, that they just kind of have to go again and hope that their luck's better next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And you had Mahrez as well last season, who always turned up and scored goals, but couldn't get in that that side as well. But on the other hand, Guardiola did throw a bit of a major sort of selection decision in that Champions League final and dropping Walker. So he's not against making big changes that would potentially win a single game rather than keeping the momentum of a sort of set starting 11. But you're looking at the side, and the history of what Guardiola likes to do is keep everything the same. He did it last season. He had that system. He looks like he's got the same this season, and I think it's a testament to the likes of Ake and Akanji and Gvardiol and even Kovacic, who I think has played well recently after a bit of a dodgy start, that they've managed to put themselves in this position that it is hard to drop them from the starting 11. Can I get a prediction from you, Simon? It's another one. I think City will win, but I don't know what manner.
4-0. Going all out for the last day of the season. I think it'd be comfortable. I think it will be similar to the 5-0 over Everton on the final day a few years ago when Aguero was scored off the bench in his final game. I genuinely think Spurs was the moment, and Sunday will be the party. But might be clipped up for being very wrong. But
I was going to say I'm listening out for a tagline to put on this podcast, and that feels like it.
everything points towards it being a comfortable and a big City win. So you would have to say that it is football if they don't win.
I'm going to go 3-2. But a comfortable one, if you like. Maybe an early West Ham one. City go and get 3 goals, and then at 95th minute, just for a little bit of nerves. But we can't both say 4-5-0, can we?
No.
But we expect City. We expect City to win, and we expect City to be champions, and we will be there on Sunday. 3 of us are heading to the Etihad. We'll have build-up, live coverage and reaction throughout the afternoon. And if there are any celebrations, you will see it all firsthand on the Manchester Evening News, all of the reaction throughout the day and throughout next week. You know where to follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, and we'll be back next week for a podcast where we will hopefully be reviewing a title win, 4 in a row, a bit of history. But if not, you will know exactly what's happened because we'll also be back. You can like and subscribe, leave a review as ever. Thank you for joining us, and try and enjoy Sunday if you can.